You're tuning in to WellFound's Ask a Recruiter, where we sit down with recruiters to share their advice on the hiring process. Hey everyone, my name's Rachel. I'm from WellFound's Product Support and Education team. I'm here with a few other people from WellFound. You'll see them. Katarina is with us and Wendy. You can wave if you want. Kat's going to be in the chat to answer any questions about if there's problems with the Zoom or any questions that are specifically about WellFound. She knows a lot about WellFound. She's happy to help pass you some help articles and things like that. And then for questions during the Q&A, we're going to save those for when we're doing the live question and answer, and I'll try to go through those sort of democratically from the beginning, and as many as we can get done, no pressure, that we'll try to get through those as well. So I'll talk about questions in a moment, but today's session is about what actually happens behind the scenes in recruiting coordination. We're really excited to have Lee Wilkins-Tate with us. They're recruiting coordination lead at Discord. So they know a lot about this process and have been there for quite a while, and I'll introduce them a little bit more detail in a minute. Like I said, for questions, this is a pure Q&A session. We're going to start with 5 questions that Lee has identified as good ones to kind of set the tone with, to warm us up. So we'll go through those first, but they're questions directly from you from the intake form. And then while we're talking, please write any additional questions you want to ask Lee into the chat. And then before I introduce Lee properly, I just want to talk just briefly about what WellFound is. If you've joined us and you somehow found out about this call without knowing, WellFound is a jobs marketplace website. We've been around for over 10 years now, maybe over 11. And we specialize in startup hiring. But of course, as the company has grown, so have the people who use us. So we have public companies and really companies all in the tech space that are using our system to make hires. So there's over 8 million matches have been made. We have over 150,000 tech jobs. And there's over 20,000 startups in our system as well. So if you haven't yet, check it out. Great. On to the good stuff. So our guest speaker today is Lee Wilkins-Tate. They bring a people-first approach to recruiting coordination at Discord, where they've spent 4.5 years transforming the interview experience, championing candidate-centered hiring. Their career began in higher education as a hall director and chair of the recruitment committee before pivoting to K-12 talent acquisition. Gaming became the bridge connecting their education experience to tech talent through managing various Discord communities centered around gaming and streaming. Lee discovered how to blend career development with tech culture. They've committed to bringing humanity back to recruiting, ensuring every candidate interaction reflects genuine care while making the interview process fun and enjoyable. And I just love that whole story of how you came to recruiting and that you're at Discord now, I think is amazing. So we're thrilled to have you here with us, Lee. Awesome. So I'll get us kick started with our first question here. And it's a good one. It's about reaching out. So does reaching out to a recruiter on LinkedIn or by email, is it a good strategy, or can it be annoying and get an applicant blacklisted? Which I'm I never even thought that would be a thing that people would do, but let's find out. And also, how can we get a recruiter to reply? So what gives them the best chance of having that interaction?
Yeah. Hi everybody. Hello. Super excited to be here. I love this question because this is the same question I had when I was trying to get out of education and go into sort of the tech industry. I will say with this, you definitely want to be strategic with the messages that you're sending to recruiters. And to my knowledge, nobody's blacklisting anybody. So if you want to keep doing it, keep doing it. It should be fine. But it really is about being intentional with who you're reaching out to. And I say that because working in recruiting ops, a lot of the times I will get messages from folks who are job seeking and interested in roles at Discord, which I love the enthusiasm, love that you're going out there and making those connections. But quite frankly, I'm I don't know anything about this role you're asking about. And the question that you're asking, I have the same one. I'm what is this? So I think it really is about being intentional with who you're reaching out to and also with the messages that you're sending. So recruiters have a lot of resumes that they're looking through, a lot of applications that they're looking through. So if you're going to send them a wall of text, let's be real, even if you get an email with a lot of text in it, you're not going to read all that. But if you do get a message that maybe has some text and some bullet points, your eyes are likely going to go to those bullet points to see what those important points are that they're talking about. So I would say if you're going to send a message, make it short, sweet, to the point, put some bullet points in there to really sort of emphasize what you're asking. And then just ask them if they have the time to respond, if they will. But I will say it's kind of like cold calling. So you can send out 100 messages and get two responses. And I think just being okay with that should be good, and know that like there may be one or two people out there that will respond, but just recognizing that recruiters are busy and they're looking through a lot. So don't take it personally if they don't respond. They have a lot on their plates. But I would say continue to reach out. Like I said, nobody's going to blacklist you. I wouldn't even necessarily say it's annoying. I expect that from people. It's just sometimes I can't respond to everyone. So that's why I say, like, don't take it personally. We all busy out here. So if you don't hear a response right away, keep it moving. It's okay. Eventually someone will respond. So yeah.
Awesome. And do you have any other advice on like, some people ask us about reaching out to people who might be the hiring manager as opposed to the recruiter at a company like Discord, which is a bigger company maybe than some of the startups that we've heard about. Do you recommend that or is that frowned upon? Any other advice?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's frowned upon. Again, like hiring managers are also going to be busy. They're trying to hire for their role and do the job that they were hired to do. So a lot of the times they may not respond, but there have been times where a hiring manager will say, "Hey, this person reached out to me on LinkedIn to the recruiter," and then ask the recruiter to follow up. So it doesn't hurt to try. Again, the worst thing that's going to happen is that your message is going to get deleted, which which is not fun, but like that's the worst that can happen. So I would say give it a try, do it. But again, just be intentional with the message that you're sending and keep it, to the point of the question that you're asking or what you're wanting to get out of the connection.
Great advice. Thank you. Okay, so the next question we have is about making mistakes. And I think this is a great open-ended question that hopefully you've got some unique insight on. So like which avoidable errors most often cause strong candidates to be overlooked? So like what are the things people are doing they don't realize is kind of, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. First and foremost is that attention to detail. I will be honest, nothing will get your resume overlooked quicker than if you put the wrong role that you're applying to, or the wrong company, or the wrong person's name in your application. And I get that like a lot of folks who are job seeking, like we know you're looking for jobs, so you're going to be applying to multiple places. So I would just say like make sure you're taking the time to switch out that role, switch out that title, what have you. But I have seen that happen so many times, and the candidate could be strong, but because you didn't do the bare minimum, as some would say, it's likely not going to get looked at. I also think something that people tend to not do in their resumes or their applications is talk about the impact that you've made somewhere. So a lot of the times in your resume, you'll list like the things that you do, or like the tasks that you were responsible for, but you miss emphasizing the change that you were able to make, or the impact that you made on the company, or even the role that you were in. So focusing more on tasks as opposed to impact, I think, is a way that strong folks do get overlooked because you haven't exemplified sort of what you're bringing to the table. You're just telling us like what you did, which is great. Like we need to know that you can do the job, but we also want to know like the value that you've added to the places before, and the value that you will add coming to us. I think also sort of rushing through applications and also not adding a cover letter or answering the questions really well is something that can cause a strong candidate to be overlooked. And like I said, I recognize that people are applying to multiple jobs, and I have been guilty of not applying to something because they asked me to write two paragraphs and I was like, absolutely not, I don't want to do that. But taking that extra couple of minutes to showcase things about yourself that maybe aren't highlighted in your resume, I think is a way that very strong people can be overlooked or be overshadowed by someone who took the extra time to sort of talk a little bit about the extra stuff that they've been able to do outside of the main tasks of their role. Those would be the main things I would say.
Well, those make a lot of sense. And it's kind of encouraging to know that like filling out those extra parts actually do have good impact if you're
Yeah.
taking them seriously and that they're something people are actually looking at. I think sometimes people feel like they're sort of
Yeah.
gatekeepers more than they're useful, but it sounds like
Hmm.
both. So
Yep.
I think that's encouraging to know. Okay, so the next question we have is about work history or experience, and it comes from Eric. Does it make a difference if a candidate has long stints at jobs? So, say two jobs in the last 10 years versus a candidate with five different jobs in 10 years. So, how does, when you're assessing those applications that have come through, how do those look differently with the perception, I guess?
Yeah. I think it could go both ways. I mean, there's pros and cons to both, right? Like someone who job hops every 2 years could look like, oh, they're not committed to the companies that they're joining, or, you got questions of, well, why was they leaving every 2 years? Whereas someone who has more tenure could be like, oh, maybe they don't have diverse thinking because they've been somewhere for so long, or maybe they've become sort of nonchalant in their role, whatever. I think it's really just preference when it comes to hiring managers, whether they want someone who has moved around and gotten diverse thinking and experiences, or someone who has shown that they're in it for the long haul and want to really make change somewhere. So in my personal experience, I come from higher education, so we were always jumping jobs every 2 years. Like it was expected that after 2 years, you've done all that you need to do and need to find somewhere else. So for me, someone who moves jobs every 2 years seems normal. I would say the main thing is really just highlighting again the impact that you've made somewhere and the things that you were able to do. And then in that cover letter, talking about why you moved elsewhere or why you stayed somewhere for a long time. Maybe it's you were working on a project that really had impact for the company as a whole and you wanted to see it from start to finish. So you stayed for a while. It really is just a matter of showcasing like what you were doing somewhere for the time that you were there, and also just being like honest about any transitions. In my career, when I first pivoted out of higher education and moved from K through 12, I had like a job for 1 year, then left, then for 6 months somewhere and left. But I was able to talk about there was misalignment with some of the things that I was doing, and I chose to move elsewhere to be more aligned with what I was passionate about and what I wanted to do in my cover letter and my interviews. And that never held me back anywhere. So I think if you're able to really just showcase the why behind whether you're there somewhere for 10 years or two is really what's most important and what people are going to look at.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like that context makes a really big difference, and
Yeah.
that hopefully that doesn't stop you from getting to the point where you can kind of explain further. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, great. And then this is a question that I think is actually recruiting related, and it's about scheduling, and it's from Will. And Will asks, how do you navigate between scheduling and making time for projects? And what percentage of the time are you scheduling versus project managing? So tell us a little bit about.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love this question because it's a little peek behind the curtain of recruiting operations and what happens on the back end of things. So, in my role, I get to manage an incredible team of recruiting coordinators who are fantastic, and they do a lot of this managing, scheduling folks for interviews, as well as working on projects and initiatives. So, something that you really have to do in a role like this, where you kind of have to context switch a little bit, is carve out time for things based on like when you've sort of understood when things happen. So, I will say in recruiting, no 2 days are the same. So also what I say is with a grain of salt, take it with a grain of salt. But for me, I know if I start at 10 my time, a lot of folks aren't going to be online until noon my time. So from 10 to 12, I'm going to work on projects because I know no one's looking for me and no one's going to be asking me for anything. So usually I start my day working on projects or finishing up scheduling some things that maybe I didn't get to the day before, and then throughout the day, it's kind of up in the air because fires happen, things happen, what have you. And then I know usually at the end of the day, my hiring managers are very responsive. They're done with their daily responsibilities. And so now they're going to ask me to start doing things. So I like to block off the end of the day to work on things like scheduling and responding to my hiring managers and things like that. Something that has helped me in this particular type of role is working with the Pomodoro method, which is basically like an amount of time that you're working on focused work time with zero distractions and then having a break after that. So I usually do about 45-minute focused work time and then a 15-minute break. And the 15-minute break is when I can deal with like those unexpected things that come up. Someone pinged me for something, I can get back to them. I like to do the 45-minute thing because I can still get back to someone within an hour. So if they message me and I just started my Pomodoro, I know before the hour's up, they'll hear from me. So I think it really is just about managing your time well and sort of understanding when the ebbs and flows are in your day and then sort of figuring out what the schedule will look like for you daily. And this changes day to day. So a lot of the times in the morning, I'll plan out my day and make sure I like sort of block out time for the unexpected things that will come up in recruiting, like it always does. So that's how I sort of approach it.
Oh, awesome. I feel like that's something everyone can relate to is like, how do you Pomodoro method? I've heard of that before. I'm gonna look it up again.
Yeah, it's great. Love it.
Okay, and then the last, sort of pre-question is about standing out. This comes from Josiah. What are the key factors recruiters look for when screening candidates beyond just the resume? And what are the most effective ways for a candidate to stand out during each stage of the application process? I think this is the part that a lot of people, we haven't talked about it so much on our Q&A sessions, but like, from the initial application and then the recruiter screening and then the final interviews, like what are sort of like the different things? Like, could you parse those out about some tips for them? And then maybe I'll just save the last question till after we answer those ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we kind of hit on some of the resume stuff before, but I think it really is showcasing who you are. I think sometimes we forget like we are individual humans with unique experiences that we bring, and maybe someone was at the same sort of level as us in the same role as us elsewhere, but they are not you. So they did not have the same experiences that you had. So highlighting that in the conversations that you're having with folks. So after that, after you get that, hey, we want to talk to you, and you're in that initial like conversation with the recruiter, talking about those things that are unique to you. So explaining some of the experiences that you've had, but incorporating your past experiences into that. So for me, that was talking a lot about how I bridged my experience in higher ed with gaming in order to get to Discord and like my unique experience that I had from being in a people focused career in higher ed and how I wanted to bring that into an industry that could be a little less people focused, but nurturing people in their interview experience. So I talked a lot about that in my recruiter screens. I talked a lot about that in my cover letter. I even highlighted it in my resume under like other experience that I had, like things that I wanted to highlight that didn't really fit under a job, but it was stuff that I did in that particular time. Um, and then I think just being authentic and genuine really goes a long way. I will say it at a company like Discord, we definitely value people for being people. So sometimes we've hired folks who like maybe didn't have the professional or standard experience of going to school and getting a degree in something, but they had experience building apps or taught themselves how to code or had experience through like a certificate program. And that was enough for us to be like, yeah, you know how to do this. So let's go ahead and, take a leap of faith or whatever you want to call it and connect with this person. So I think really honing in on the people side of things really goes a long way. And I think we don't think about that because maybe we feel like it's sort of inappropriate or not professional, but all companies know that people are people and all companies have like a people org. So it is important. So making sure you lean into that, I think, is a great way to stand out from the normal candidate who is really only just trying to sell themselves as an employee and not as a person who also happens to be an employee, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I guess those, like the screening and the final interviews, those are really great places to showcase your people, your peopleness. I mean, ultimately, the people who are hiring want to know who they're going to spend all day with, or like all day online with, or what have
Mm-hmm.
you. So that makes so much sense. And then just to finish Josiah's question, they said additionally, how can I best tailor my application to match what recruiters prioritize for roles that they have high competition for? So I think,
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of like, how do I look at how a job description is written and figure out what are they looking for so I can
Yep.
situate myself best?
Yep, absolutely. I learned this a long time ago, and I've noticed it's still pretty relevant when job descriptions are written. A lot of like the main job duties are going to be near the top of the bullet points. And then there's going to be like the stuff that maybe you'll do sometimes, but not all the time, will be somewhere in the middle. And then there's like the extra stuff where like we're gonna ask you to do stuff that may not be in here, but we're gonna put this bullet point here. That's gonna be near the bottom. So a lot of times what I've done when applying for jobs is look at those bullet points on the JD and then sort of align my experience with those um, points on the JD. Now that we have AI, that is much easier to do. So you could essentially ask AI to sort of show you the themes or the things that are in that job description. And then you can then tailor your resume and your experiences to those themes. I think it's also about leaning into your transferable skills as well. So you may not have direct experience doing some of those things, but you have done some things that are like kind of sort of like that or adjacent to that, and making sure you highlight those in your resume as well. And then I also think it's important. I think sometimes people get a little angsty or nervous about things that maybe they're a little, to say, wobbly, and that like you're like, I kind of know how to do this but not really. So like, should I say I'm capable of doing this on a resume? I say yes, because there's always room for growth in any role that you're in, and I don't think any person is going to want to hire someone who has done every single thing on their JD, because there's going to be no room for growth. That person is going to get bored relatively quickly. So make sure you're also highlighting those things that you might feel a little wobbly in, but you at least could sort of fumble your way through it. I think it's very important to put those in your resume as well, so that they know that you have that sort of growth mindset and are able to tackle some things that will be a part of your job if you were to join the company.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. For those wobbly, experiences, do you suggest people frame them like as in I'm like you're still learning this, or like your aptitude level is X or Y? It's like sort of to be
Yeah,
transparent about it.
yeah, I would think so. In my experience as, well, a recruiting coordinator and as a recruiter previously, I appreciate folks who have said that they have, some experience in this, or maybe they put it on their resume and then sort of under the part where they put like certificates or like experiences they've had, they list some of the things that they're doing to sort of supplement their learning for that.
Mm.
Those are great because it shows you're willing to go outside of your job duties to learn something, or you have a passion for that. And I think that goes an incredibly long way, especially with hiring managers who want to see someone who's willing to like put in the hard work for some of their tasks and their roles.
Awesome. And probably just like a willingness to learn. That makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
too. Awesome. Okay, well, that's our prepared questions. We're getting to my favorite part, which is where we get to hear from other people.
Yes.
So thanks for everyone who's on the call with us. I'm gonna just scroll up the chat, but I'm also gonna open up my view so I can see everyone. So if anyone who wants to raise a hand to let me know that you want to ask a question, you can also do that. I've got it open now so I can see. Okay, let me start at the beginning here if we've got any questions. We got some really nice shout outs. People excited that you're on the call, Lee, which is nice. Okay, that was insightful. Did I miss a question up here? No. Okay, we've got a question from Mark, and it's about transitions. Mark, do you want to ask your question out loud? See if I can get him to. Oh, you said one sound and then went mute again. Maybe it's not a good time to ask the question. I can ask. Okay, great. Scrolling back up to it. So Mark asks, should we include in the resume about those transitions? Oh, sorry. Like, I think it means how should we
Mhm.
include it? Lots of Fed contractors are due to contract endings, positions eliminated, budget cuts, so like
Mhm.
anything that you suggest about, I'm guessing the kind of contextualization about different transitions or
Yeah.
like stints and contracts and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's great to add that, especially, if you were impacted by, like you mentioned, a role being eliminated. That extra context is really helpful. I think it makes it difficult when a recruiter has to assume or infer something. um, I feel like sometimes they might be less likely to move someone forward or may deprioritize because they've had to make an inference or assumption. So I think if it was a contract, putting that on your resume is completely fine. If you were impacted by RIF or if you were furloughed or anything like that, I don't see any problem why you shouldn't put that on your resume. It gives that extra context, which I think is great.
That's a question that comes up quite a lot, like on our calls, just because of the nature of startups and like even when we've had recruiting calls, the natures of being a recruiter even sometimes can lead to some of those things. And I think there's industry knowledge about how common those things are. So I think being transparent makes a lot of sense. Okay, so the next question we had is from Janine, I think I'm saying her name right, about cover letters and AI, and I think it's a really important question actually. Do you want to ask your question out loud? See.
That's okay. I think it's you already got the question.
Well, I'll just read it then. You had asked, you brought up cover letters multiple times, which is true. We don't always have recruiters talk about cover letters. I think there's some that don't like them, but are you still expecting that in times of generative AI and a crazy job market, when you still have to apply to hundreds of roles? So, like, has the opinion changed, or is that something that you think really still helps people stand out?
I think it could go either way. Like I said in the beginning, recruiters are busy. So the cover letter should also be kind of short and sweet. I personally prefer a cover letter that has some bullet points in there because I'm likely going to read those and keep it moving. But I think it's like truly the only way you can add more value to your application that you can't put on your resume. I will also say a lot of times when someone's using AI. I mean, you can kind of tell by how it sounds. So I would say if you keep the cover letter short and sweet, you want to notate a couple of things that you've done that you weren't highlighted on your resume, great. It's not necessary. Again, you can weave some of the extra stuff that you've done into your resume in a section of, like I said, other things that you other oh my god, what skills, that's the word, or certificates that way. But I will say if a job has the supplemental questions that you need to answer, like I would say take the time to write those and don't use AI to write them because I think because we've seen it so much on the recruiting side, it's pretty easy to point out when someone's using AI to answer one of those questions. So not necessary, but I think in a time where people are usually not doing cover letters because they're like not required as much anymore and because of AI, I think that is the time where you could take advantage of that and put your little cute little short cover letter with the bullet points in there and call it a day. So personal preference though.
Okay, great. I think that's really helpful. And also just it's interesting to hear that the kind of literacy of recruiters acknowledging what that they can spot AI so easily and quickly is like really important to keep in mind. I feel like
Hmm.
what I've heard lately is sort of to be using AI as like kind of the last editing note on your original writing to kind of capture things
Yes.
maybe is the best way because it's still a good tool,
Hmm.
stuff. Um, okay, let me see. We have any other questions in the chat? Oh, we don't have any other questions yet. Oh, wait, we've got one. Christina Caldwell, do you want to ask your question out loud if you're up for it?
Yes, sure. Sorry, let me get to it. So my question really much is, about putting volunteer experience on your resume. So I recently graduated from grad school, really into marketing, trying to figure out, I do have a lot of experience with like, a volunteer role, club, organization on campus, and I was wondering, is that a good idea to incorporate in my relevant experience? Because I did I think one of
Well, at the very end, you were breaking up a little bit. I think we got your
so
question,
sorry.
but let's see if let's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got your question. If
Yeah, I
Okay.
think I got the main
okay.
gist of it. Yeah. Congrats on your graduating. I would
Thank you.
say, of course, I would say add it. But I mean, it's probably not going to have a huge impact unless, of course, you're sort of adding value to the experience that you have. And again, like
Hmm.
showing you've spent your own like personal time and energy that you're not
Hmm.
getting paid for to do
Hmm.
these extra things to really show your commitment to the work that you're doing. So I would definitely say add it, especially if you've done it for a while or have done it with the same place for a little bit and built sort of a relationship and rapport there.
Hmm.
Um, I would say I would say that for sure.
Sure, got it. And then I could talk about it a little bit more in the cover letter. Would that be a great idea? Oh, there we go. Looking forward to that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, congratulations again, Christina.
Thank
Uh,
you.
okay, great. And then we've got a question from Greg Salter. Do you want to ask your question out loud?
Sure. Hey, Lee, thanks for the great talk and thanks everybody. Question for you about more senior level jobs that I'm trying to find and don't typically see those on a lot of the job boards, or by the time they get to those job boards, may be too late is what I've heard. And from what I've heard, it's networking with recruiters or just general network is how you get considered for those roles. But I guess my network currently isn't that expansive. And as my outreach has been to recruiters on, let's say, LinkedIn, just kind of cold outreach to folks, I haven't been received that well. So I'm curious, I guess, if you have any thoughts on for those types of jobs, like what more could I be doing?
Mm, that's a great question. And from my experience supporting senior level roles, it is more about the networking. I have seen recruiters and sourcers do more of the outreach for those types of roles and hiring managers as well. I think for the senior level roles, it probably is more of the reaching out to folks on LinkedIn, or also looking at specific companies that you're interested in and checking their job boards regularly to see what sort of senior level roles they have open. But yeah, I would say in my experience, it's definitely more networking and knowing someone who knows someone who knows someone who is looking to hire for that role. So this would be one of those instances where I would look for maybe the recruiter or the hiring manager for a role that you're interested in and then reaching out. But yeah, I don't know. Rachel, I might need to tag you in for this one. And just in my experience, it's definitely been more of us seeking candidates for senior level roles than it has been for them applying directly.
Sure. I mean, I've got a couple of things that are popping into my head just from other recruiters that we've had on the calls. Of course, we've done like 26 of these. So I've got I've got kind of stored knowledge. The two things come to mind. One is about like other kinds of networking, not just to hiring managers or to recruiters, but like even one person removed that might be at a company when you see a role. I think really recently I saw something about like those are the most successful referrals because the person has like no stakes when they when they suggest that they visit with you, rather than like a best friend or something. So try to think about like how to enlarge your network a little bit just that way. You'd be surprised by who you might know or who someone's brother is or what have you. And LinkedIn, well, if doesn't do this so well, but LinkedIn does kind of show you connections you might know for some of those things, and it could be helpful. And then just to like empower you to reach out to those people, a lot of companies have referral bonuses. So like they might actually get a reward if you're hired. And so they actually are kind of encouraged to make those connections. So don't think about it like you're bothering someone. And then the other thing that I was thinking of is oh yeah, just to keep your actual profiles on all these sites up to date. So in Well Found, what you see as an applicant is like the tools to apply directly to jobs. But what recruiters have available to them, and the same thing on LinkedIn and other jobs marketplace, is the ability to source candidates. So if your profile is not actually up to date with all of the information, it's the painstaking part of like taking your resume and actually parsing it into a profile so that it is then searchable through those tools. That's one way of I think that people, I'm going to guess, maybe Lee, you've got some context on this if I'm right or wrong, but I would think for like a more senior level that it would be something where they may feel that they have to reach out to people to fill those roles rather than have direct applicants. They might not even post those jobs. So if you're not available to be able to be searched, and we've got I'll try to find it and include it unless Kat is on it, but we've got an Ask a Recruiter with a person who specializes in sourcing, and he kind of shows you what's helpful to put in your profile to be found for those kinds of things. So that'd be the other thing, is like I think that's like a thing a lot of people miss, is how much detail you should put into your profiles on these websites that you actually have the potential to be sourced to. Did that help?
Very much so. Yes. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're so happy to help. Um, and yeah, there's also some other Ask Recruiters on referrals specifically. So I'll try to maybe add those to the follow-up email that we send. And they're helpful to everybody. It's sort of blanket advice that way. Okay, so we went from Greg, and then Mark. I think let me just take a little stock of how many questions we have. Mark, I'll come back to your follow-up question if we have enough time. I'm gonna make sure we get to the ones that are new questions. So Harry is asking a question about gaps in work experience. Harry, do you want to ask your question out loud?
Sure. So I was wondering how much impact does I guess like an employment gap have on candidates, and what is the best way to minimize its impacts? Like, I guess judgmental impacts pretty much, since I have like currently I'm still like looking for new opportunities. I have like a pretty big work experience gap, and I just want to know how to best mitigate that.
That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking. I think if there is a large gap, calling that out on your resume, whether that's adding, a I don't know, I guess a portion of your resume of like the time that you're job seeking, and then maybe like listing some of the things that you've done during that time. I think there's value to that. In my experience, I've always been at companies where recruiters were actually looking at resumes and not just like going through a system that was automatically weeding people out. So I think when you take that time to add that piece is valuable. But I also think if you were to add that piece as sort of like a role that you're in, which is job seeking, because looking for a job is a job in itself, listing that, it could be a way to make sure you're still, if a company was using an ATS system that was scanning resumes, it would still have a role during that sort of gap. So I would say calling it out. Your job is looking for a job. And like I said, adding some of the other things that you're doing during that time, whether it's passion projects or learning, adding those things there too, I think is a great way to sort of list what you've done during the gap while letting folks know it's just times are tough and you haven't landed a role that works for you yet. And I think that's totally fine.
Thank you.
Great question. I hope that was helpful. I'm sure it was. Christopher has a question next, and I think it's a great question. I'm excited for you to ask it. Do you want to ask it out loud?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, we can.
Okay, this is kind of a chunky question. I'm sorry, but so I'll just read it out loud. First off, thanks for doing this. Been using Wellfound for maybe like a month now, and I've had one interview, but I
Cool.
also I haven't really been using it in the past couple of weeks. Anyway, I've seen a fair amount of people at Discord that have worked at top tech companies like Google and Microsoft, like companies like that. I feel like having that experience in your resume definitely gives you an edge. So, do you have an example of a candidate that you interviewed or hired that didn't work at one of these bigger tech companies? And what about the candidate stood out to you? Like, was it something on their resume or how they presented themselves or something like that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think plenty of people that work here who did not work at any of the big tech companies prior. It really is just about the experiences that they've had. So there's someone that always sticks out in my mind, which is someone who we hired years ago as a software engineer who didn't have any official experience working as a software engineer anywhere. But they did some of the like certificates through Coursera for software engineering, and then they had created a lot of bots on Discord that were used by a lot of servers. And then they helped sort of manage the bots in the larger servers to sort of fix bugs and kinks and things like that. And so highlighting that on their resume more so than like their professional experience was what landed them the role with us. So I think a lot of the times people get sort of caught up in the, oh, I don't work for Meta or I never worked for Google or whatever. That really don't matter at the end of the day. What really matters is if you are capable of doing the role that you're applying for. So I think it really is just about highlighting the work that you do, the impact that you've made, whether that's at a tech company or whether that's working in K through 12 education and highlighting the transferable skills that you bring. That's what really matters the most. And I think with startups in particular, they're going to be a little bit more scrappy and they're going to want to look for people who have that ability to context switch and be able to sort of make something out of nothing because we're working with limited resources. So being able to show how you're able to learn some things without maybe the professional experience, but still be able to get the experience one way or another. So yeah, lean into those transferable skills and the experience that you have. Don't matter if you did it at Google or Meta or anything like that. You did it. So that's what matters the most.
I see. Thank you. Thank you. That's definitely informative.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I love that question. I love that answer, Lee. Like it's very encouraging to hear of this person whose passion was Discord and they found all these ways to make fixes. So I feel like follow your passion. It's like a little bit of a takeaway there. Show your passion. I feel like everyone's got
Mhm.
passion. And then Janine, I'm gonna assume you want me to ask this question too, or do you want to ask your question about Ivy League?
I guess I can expand a little bit on that, especially with the answer to the recent question. I guess the question is with the current job market where one job gets like 1,000 applications, how do you suppose to stand out if there is enough people from a fancy school, that also want that job? Yes, I think it's a very similar question to how do you stand out next to recent like ex-Google, ex-Meta engineers? It doesn't feel like you can just show passion and that's enough anymore.
Yeah. The I will say the roles that have hundreds upon hundreds of applicants are hard wherever it is. I think for me, my sort of advice, again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I would say narrowing it down to companies that you like really want to work at, which I know is super hard, especially when you're looking for a job. I've been in a situation where I was like desperate to work and I was like, I just need to find a job. I don't care where. But I had to remember that like I needed to be strategic about where I was applying and applying to places where I was like, if I get hired here, do I actually want to work here every day? And like, is the mission aligned with what I want to do? And does this company value what I want, what I value as well? So that was one way that I sort of narrowed it down and was really intentional about where I was spending my time and what I was looking for. And in my experience, it don't matter if you went to Ivy League school or not. Like, did you get your piece of paper that said you graduated from college? Yes. Did you not? Okay. I think there are plenty of people who can do a job without having ever had formal education or graduating. And I think that's the great thing about tech that I've seen is that that's the ideal of, oh, you have to go to college, get your degree in engineering or whatever technical stuff, and then you get the job hasn't really held true. Like, are there people who get the jobs because they went to school for engineering? Yes. Are there people who went to school for education and then pivoted because they liked engineering more and learned that and wanted to become a software engineer? Yes. So I wouldn't be discouraged because you don't have the right credentials. I think it's really about highlighting, like I said, going to the job description, seeing what they're looking for, and highlighting those things in your resume of what you are capable of doing and the impact that either you have made or the impact that you're making on organizations that you're part of, volunteering that you've done. That kind of stuff is what's going to stand out. The education, I feel like times have changed and it's not as important as we feel like it is because you can get experience in so many different ways nowadays. So, really, it's just about highlighting the tasks that you'll be able to do and then the impact that you will bring to the company in the role. Those are the two main things that people are looking for, truthfully, in my experience from working with hiring managers and recruiters. I don't know if Rachel, if you want to add a little something on that, please feel
No,
free.
I think you've landed on it. I mean, I help edit our from their Why Work Here videos, but they're all with founders of companies and they talk about what they're looking for with hiring. And I would say that's like a widely held founder belief is that what matters much more is like what you've built. You know, if you're an engineer or if you're a product manager, like what do you have to show for the expertise that you have and like what's concrete about it and like a real de-emphasis in what your especially your educational credentials. I think they might care a little bit more about where you've worked. Uh, if I had to like choose one that they would look at with more veracity, is that the right word? It would be probably where you've worked, but I think that everything you said totally holds true. Um, from what I've heard anyways. But it's a great question, and I think it's really encouraging to like talk about how alignment is much more important than and kind of demystifying the credential part. Robert has a question that I think is something that a lot of people would like to know about. So, Robert, do you want to ask your question out loud?
Ask you as long as you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. So sometimes you get lucky, you get your first round, second round interview, and then the trail goes cold. So I was wondering if there are any typical themes that you hear around why you'd think an interview went well and maybe it didn't go as well as you thought, or vice versa.
Mm,
And thank you for doing this. I appreciate all the expertise you're sharing.
of course. This is a great question. I will say sometimes it's just the fact that there was stronger candidates in the pipeline and they wanted to go that route. Sometimes it could just be that maybe you got through the interview and like showcased the things that they were looking for, but maybe not as strongly as they would have liked. But honestly, for the most part, it really just is, in my experience, that they found someone stronger or a couple of people that were stronger and they want to explore that. So they do that. But for the most part, it's that, or maybe you just didn't showcase what they were looking for or didn't answer the question fully. Sometimes that happens too. And I know as a yapper during interviews, there are times when I'm just talking and during my talking, I'm like, girl, what are you even saying? Like, bring it back. And so I think that happens sometimes in interviews with nerves and just you're answering the question and then you go on a little tangent and then you try to come back, but you're just gone. And that happens more times than you would think. So sometimes it's just that. And I just want people to know, like, don't be discouraged if it is a no and you don't get any feedback back because a lot of the times places will not give you feedback. And that's just because they can't and they don't want to get in trouble, essentially. I mean, a lot of the times we have to just say, generally, you didn't exemplify what we were looking for, and that's fine. But sometimes you can reach out afterwards and ask if there's anything specific that they were looking for that maybe you could work on in the future. I've done that at a few companies too, where I was like, dang, what happened? What I do? And they were able to give me some feedback on I could have done stronger at exemplifying some of the points that they'd asked for. But most of the time, it really just is there's stronger people in the pipeline. And that just happens, especially with the roles with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants. It's going to be a lot of people that they're going to move forward with.
Thank you so much. That's super helpful.
Yeah, it's super helpful. I feel like that's the mystery when you can't get the advice because they can't there's like liability stuff too. I think is what you're trying to
Yes.
say. So like they can't actually do that and you just feel like there's a mystery to I did something wrong and I'll never know. Whereas like really all it is that they found someone else's alignment just was somehow clearer, which is totally frustrating, but it's still
Hmm.
very encouraging to get two interviews. Like no matter where it rightly,
Yeah.
that means that there was something really there,
Yep.
I think. Just to end with an encouraging part.
Definitely.
Okay, it's 4:55. We might be able to squeeze one last question in. Let me just take a little look here. Oh, wait, I already got to that one. And maybe I skipped ahead at some point. I'm sorry about that. Alex A., you've asked a question about navigating the interview process. Maybe we'll make this our last question if you want to ask it out loud.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, y'all. This has been super helpful. So to my question, a couple times I've gone through like various interview processes where I'm like, I want to talk about something that's related to my existing role or former role, and I'm like, okay, this is proprietary. Like it's like an existing client, a former client, things of that nature. Am I kind of going against like status quo, or is this kind of like faux pas if I just basically say, hey, this is something I can't really divulge into and I can't discuss. However, this is a large enterprise client instead. Like, how do you navigate like talking about some of those like sensitive stuff that your employer or former employer kind of holds, as like gospel truth?
Mm.
I mean, is it even in essence, I mean, I know this is kind of like in these kind of conversations, I would say it's kind of almost to be assumed that like, hey, this is for the purposes of my status and applicancy with your company. So it's not like hey, you're going to take it and run with it, but still, it's like in the space that I work in specifically, this is like a hot topic.
Mhm. That's a good question. I would say stuff like that is assumed because we're all in the same, I mean, we're all in the same boat. Like we get it.
Right.
So I think it's okay to know that that is an assumption had by the interviewer or the company. I think sort of, hmm, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Being as vague as you can or as detailed as you can without saying too much, I think is fine. But also, I know people have prefaced that in their interviews of like, I don't want to go into too many details because XYZ.
Right.
And we're like, yeah, we know that. And this is why places also have NDAs when you're interviewing, so that if things are divulged, you can't be going and telling everybody about their business. So I think it's fine to sort of preface with that, like you said, and have that conversation. But for the most part, I mean, like we get it. We know how this works. So I wouldn't stress over it. too much, to be completely honest. Rachel, if you want to tag in, please do. But
This one I
that's my
don't have
thought.
very much insight on. It hasn't come up before. But it seems your gut, like my gut says your answer makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, Alex. And thank you everyone for joining. So we are at the end, unfortunately. This has been an awesome hour together with Lee. We would love it. We have a Discord channel that we use specifically for Ask a Recruiter audience and anyone else who wants to join. And it's a great way to connect with other job seekers and share opportunities. And we have a channel called Profile Level Up where people kind of co-participate in giving feedback on application materials for roles. So if you want to like skirt the AI judgment and get some of your application materials in front of real human eyes, you can use our Discord. So Katarina's put that into the chat for us. And then we would love it if you took our survey. Oh, my GIF isn't going. There's a GIF there that should say thank you. I don't know where it went. Oh, there it is. So thank you all for joining. And if you can, please fill out our survey. Wendy put it in the chat just a little bit up from the bottom. And this is a great way of letting us know what you'd love to have an Ask a Recruiter session on. If you've got any topic ideas or even outside the box, like workshops, I'm really open to, making this reflect what the community really needs. And it's also a great way of signing up and saying that you'd like to be included on all our future invites for Ask a Recruiter. So if you've enjoyed this session and want to come back, please fill that out and add your email. I'll make sure to invite you. And then that's it. Thank you so much again, Lee. It's been awesome to have you. And thank you everyone for your great questions. We have some really good ones today, I think. All right. Bye y'all and stay in touch.
Thank
And
you.
I'll send the email with the recording too. Ready to find your next role or discover top talent? Visit us at wellfound.com.